Contrary to popular opinion, pastors are made, not born. We might come to the work with certain natural gifts or gifts of the Spirit, but it's really congregations that help shape us into the pastors we become. We're going to be talking with Gary Simpson, the pastor of Concord Baptist Church of Christ in Brooklyn, New York, about just that thing. Stay tuned for Good God. Welcome to Good God, conversations that matter about faith and public life. I'm your host, George Mason, and I'm pleased to welcome to the program today my dear friend, my brother, Gary Simpson, the Reverend Dr. Gary Simpson. Welcome, Gary.
It's great to see you, George. Great to be with you. I've been longing to get here to talk with you.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that because we have much to talk about, but I think probably we should begin by letting people know that when we call one another brother, we're not just talking like we might on the street.
Yes, I think that is so. I think across the years we have carved and cut out a relationship that is more like kindred than many of the collegial relationships I have, and it's authentic, and I received that title from you with open arms and open heart.
Well, I'm so glad, and I should say that people might be interested to know that we're having this conversation on the weekend of the 30th anniversary of my pastorate here at Wilshire Baptist Church, and you were good enough to come and preach for us this morning, and it was a stirring sermon. Those who heard it understand exactly what I mean, because you preached about stirring the pot somewhat, and how there's a text from the book of Kings where it talks some about that, and how the prophet dealt with a dangerous situation and how it turned into good.
Right.
So, but thank you for that beautiful contribution and gift. Gary, you're the senior pastor of a very important church historically in Brooklyn, New York, Concord Baptist Church of Christ in Brooklyn. I went to high school in Brooklyn. I'm a New Yorker. You're actually from Columbus, Ohio,
right.
But now Brooklyn is your home, and Dallas is my home. But there is this sort of thing about New York, isn't there? That it's for Americans, in many ways, it's kind of the center of the universe.
This is absolutely right, and there is something about it that is so, and it sounds cliche, but cosmopolitan. You are engaged with so many worlds, cultures, identities at one time, and it really, I won't say it makes you better, but I think being there day to day, you are aware of the world in a way. You must be in order to actually even to survive in that space, actually.
Right. So a lot of people I know assume that probably you came to New York from the South, which is not true.
Right.
You're from Ohio.
Right.
I remember talking with Peter Gomes about this, and he was, of course, at Harvard, but Peter's from Plymouth.
Right.
He was from Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Right.
Certainly not a Puritan, but Peter used to take umbrage all the time when people would assume that he came from the South.
Yes, and of course, and to be Baptist.
That's
also,
right.
That's the second part. When I say a Baptist, they assume I am from the South.
Right.
And Southern Baptist.
Right.
And neither of those things are true.
Well, we'll get into some more of that, about what kind of Baptist and how some of the legacy of your church in that regard too. But I think it's really interesting that you're here this weekend with me, and both of us have very long-term pastorates by standards of most churches. So I've just hit 30. You're at 28 or 9?
I'll be 29 next month.
Next month, 29. Yeah. And each of us followed long-term pastorates. My predecessor, 30 years. Yours?
42.
42 years.
42
yes.
years, yeah.
So What do you make of the continuity that we've experienced in our churches, which is so rare of congregations today?
Yeah, I think it says something about the congregations themselves.
Yes.
About understanding that pastors do not arrive; they become pastors.
Ah, good, good. We were both babies, weren't we?
Oh my gosh! And I think, George, about some of the things that I did and said earlier. I am so grateful that this church practiced forgiveness and grace.
I've said some of the same things this weekend. Absolutely, yes.
But I think the communal will for their leader to do well.
Yes.
There's this sense and I felt that today in Wilshire today, a kind of common will of the people who want George to do well.
Right.
And that is not an affront to them, and is not in competition with their own doing well. It is an opportunity for them to both receive the benefits of that.
Yes.
And to be able to turn that over and out into the community. I think that's what I know that's what Concord has done.
There's a 99-year-old woman in our church right now. She is very much the matriarch of the congregation. 30 years ago, at 69 years old, shortly after I came as a young pastor, I said or did something that she didn't like, and I just said, well, this is the way we're going to do it. And she looked at me and she said, young man, you've got a lot to learn, and I'm just the one to teach you.
See.
And I mentioned that to her the other day in the presence of a bunch of folks at a luncheon, and she laughed, and we both laughed about it. But, she and I have not always agreed on a lot. But I know she loves me, and she defends me, and she wants me to be the best pastor I can be.
Exactly.
Isn't that what you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I think you because the work is about relationships.
Yeah.
There is no relationship that is always wonderful and 100%. There are times at which just because we are different. I was in a seminar the other day, and I never thought about it until it was said. The leader said, every marriage is cross-cultural.
Oh, yeah.
And she said it doesn't matter if you are the same in so many other ways, but the fact that you both have been raised in different places, you are in different table times or no table time. There are things that happen that are rituals in one space, and you're negotiating that the cross-cultural reality. I think the same is true, and I'm always leery of talking about, I don't like this conversation about the pastors and the churches. We're here at installation for the marriage between this pastor and the church.
Marriage.
Like, no. The church is already married.
Right, exactly.
And the pastor may already be married too. We don't want to do that.
That's right. That's right.
But I do think at that sense of understanding the relationality.
Yes.
There are some people in Concord who were cool on me when I got there, and they have warmed up. And there are some people who are very warm on me who have cooled off over time. And you can't, in this work, you can't take it personally.
Oh, my goodness.
You can't say, okay, George did that to me in 1968. I'm never speaking to him again, because life happens. Deaths happen. Births happen. Crises happen. People go to jail. Families get in trouble. Good things happen. People graduate. They watch, or the 100th birthday for that member.
That's right.
Who wants you to be there.
That's right. Exactly.
I mean, all of those things are really a part of having the fluidity to be able to let the relationships grow, develop.
Yes.
And they can't be marked by any one thing. Right?
I do think that each of us had the challenge, but also the blessing of having esteemed predecessors. We know that I know that Gardner C. Taylor, your predecessor, Doc Taylor, very important figure in Baptist life and American history, and he blessed you. He treated you like his heir apparent and his pastor, and my predecessor, Bruce McKeever, did the same. Sometimes that's a burden, because when we're young, we want to have our own way and our own voice, and we want them to just, I know that was then, but this is now. Could you kind of do that?
Right.
And now here we are. And it's important to remember, one day somebody's going to follow us. Right. And so it was more work, I think, in some ways in those early years for me, and maybe for you, to really be patient about that with people. Huh?
Yeah, I think that is the key. When I did something right in the church, people would say, whether it was true or not, Dr. Taylor told him to do that, right?
Yes, right.
And if I did something wrong, they'd say, he
no
should have talked to Dr. Taylor. So they had created this kind of they have created this kind of conversation that Dr. Taylor and I were having that we weren't really having. But and it was hard when you're young and you're trying to establish yourself, and and God knows, again, I'm grateful that David has this passage. One of the psalmists has this passage when he says that he's thanking God that the sins of his youth did not find him out, right? And every time I read that passage, I don't care if I'm in Bible study, but I say, excuse me a moment, right? Yes. There were so many things I wish I'll use your golf term, had a mulligan.
Yes, that's right.
But I'm grateful for the journey. Even those wrong decisions and things have helped to, establish my own identity as pastor, which is very different.
Right.
And I remember there was a pastor in my youth, George, who we did not get along. We were just so opposite in every way, theologically opposite, politically opposite, but he had very wise things to say, right? So I find myself repeating him a lot. In my youth, I would have dismissed him because of those differences.
Yes, right.
But now the things he says make sense. So one of the things he said, son, we're companions and not competitors.
Very good.
And he would say, this is not a sprint. It's a relay race, and it's a marathon. When I started to kind of understand the passing of the baton, and everybody runs their leg, right?
Yes.
It really relieved me from feeling the kind. And I never felt competition with Dr. Taylor. I didn't think I could compete with him, given what his wonderful record was. But I also really believed that there was a space, if God had called me there, which I believe so, that there was a space for me to be there and to be who I was.
Right.
And if I might, I'll tell you a little story about that. So I went to hear Jeremiah Wright preach one Sunday. They were still in the old church. They hadn't gone to the new Trinity. I went to an early service because I was preaching in Chicago at 11. I walked into the church, and there was Dr. Wright on the piano playing the whole service, George. Wow. An associate who had come home preached, and he played the whole service on the piano, and masterfully played. And so when I first started out, everybody that I wanted to learn from, I'd bring them to Concord to preach, and I'd say, I just need one lunch with you or dinner or something. And I went out and I told him that story. And he said to me, when God called you to Concord, God knew every gift that you had, and God expects you to use that. Dr. Taylor did not sing, did not do music, and I thought that's what it meant to be pastor of Concord Church. I'm no great singer. I'm a musician.
Yes, you are.
I'm a singer.
You're a pianist.
And and so that has become a part of the way in which my personality
There you go.
Lives out in the life of the church. Yeah.
My predecessor was a wonderful storyteller as a preacher, had a great sense of humor, and I would say came from a more oral culture of preaching from the hills of North Carolina.
Okay.
I am more of a Yankee, so I tend to move more from the written word to the spoken word. And so it took a while for me to find my voice with a congregation that had been used to listening in a certain way, you know. And so some of that was my adapting, some of it was their adapting. And I kind of think of it like, you know, one of us is broadcasting and the other's tuning into the right frequency. And when that starts to come together, the static dissipates, and you start really hearing each other, right? And that's where the beautiful thing happens. Yeah, so let's take a break, and we'll come back and continue this conversation about pastoring and church life.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for continuing to tune in to Good God. These conversations are part of a larger program that is called Faith Commons, the umbrella organization, you might say, of Good God. Good God is the first project of Faith Commons, which is a nonprofit organization that is intended to do public theology, you might say. It's multi-faith, not just Christian, Jewish, Muslim, other faiths, but all of them becoming involved in the question of how do we promote the common good together. There are so many areas of need and concern in our community, and Faith Commons is trying to help bridge the gaps between religions and peoples in our community so that we can have a more just and peaceful society. Thanks for continuing to support us. We're back with Gary Simpson, the senior pastor of Concord Baptist Church of Christ in Brooklyn, New York, in the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood of Brooklyn. And I have had the great privilege of preaching from your pulpit, Gary, and you've now preached from mine twice, I think. And,
I owe you.
You owe me, that's right. All our debts are paid in full in so many different ways in friendship. But we both been talking about our churches this weekend and about our joy of ministry, really. And it's you know, being a pastor is not an individual sport. So you can't be a pastor without a people. And so we both know that so much of any success in ministry that we've had is because of these churches that have seen to it that their pastors grow and are successful, and that calls for some change from them too, as well as from us. So what have you seen in your life in the church like that?
Well, I'm just mindful of the people. There's nobody comes into a pastorate ready to take it all on. And there's a lot. I mean, there's so much to absorb. You spend I think your first moments in a church absorbing the history.
Oh, true.
Both the official and the unofficial history and the way in which those stories clash.
Right.
But I really believe God raises people up for you, guiding spirits. There were a few people in Concord, including Dr. Taylor, but Dr. Taylor was not the only guiding spirit I had. I had a woman in our church. She was a retired regional IRS director. And for all of her life, when I was an associate with Dr. Taylor, she was over the youth group, and she just guided generations of youth. When I got there and she retired, I brought her into the office as my administrator, and she just raised me as a pastor to be. She would not bring anything to me. Cosetta Green, I'll call her name.
All right.
Cosetta was from Arkansas, and she she would not bring me anything that I didn't need to know. And sometimes she would handle things herself. Having her in my cadre or cabinet, so to speak, gave me her integrity. I inherited her integrity.
Wow.
Right? Some of the people who weren't quite sure on me knew that Cosetta was a person of integrity, and that, and so she would help me out in that regard. I had another, Annabelle, who was the chair, not the last, but chair of the deaconess board. And Annabelle would say, "That's my pastor. He might not always be right, but he's never wrong." And so I was doing a lot of eulogies. I guess I've buried close to 900 people since I've been there now. And before the eulogy, I said, "Okay, Annabelle, tell me about this person." And she'd give me a snapshot of that person's life, and that helped me to go in and talk about people and to come to know people that I otherwise would have just been given a generic eulogy. But those people did those kind of things in the background. They didn't seek attention, but they wanted their pastor to be successful is not the word, faithful,
right?
And to be a pastor who had, in his own day and time, happened because I'm a male, his own day and time to do well. And I always sense both of those women are gone now, but their deaths were kind of like, okay, you can do it now. You don't need me. I remember when I went to. We also transitioned to a diaconate. We removed the gender requirement for deacons. And Cosetta took ill, and she moved to North Carolina, but I flew down to see her, and I said, "Cosetta, I think we're ready to do it. We're gonna do it now." It's her response, "Well, it's about time." It's about time.
I had there's a man who's still in the church, and years ago, 25 years ago probably, fellow joined the church, this couple, and he had brought some of his pain of another church with him, and he was immediately overly enthralled with me and wanted to be close to me, it seemed, and when that didn't sort of become what he had hoped, he sort of turned the other way and started finding things to share with people about how he thought I was wrong about this, or there's a problem with that, or whatever. And this had gotten to the point where I was becoming really alarmed by this and needing to do something. And suddenly it turns out he left the church. And it took me a little while, but I found out that this man in the church took him to lunch and said, we're happy for you to be at our church, but we've been doing okay before you came, and we're going to do okay after you're gone.
Right.
So understand that we don't share your feelings about this, and if you would like to be part of our community, then there are some ways that we do things that we expect you to exercise a certain comportment. And he was not prepared to do that, and he left. But nobody asked him to do that.
Right.
He understood our church culture. He was determined to protect me. And, I of course, I believe if I had been deeply at fault in some way, he would have also come to me. But this is the way churches handle things well or poorly.
Yes.
And those churches that let these people become bullies or to ride roughshod over people, and they have no capacity to stand up to this and to create the health that needs to happen, or as you'd say, Elisha's putting some flour in the stew pot when there was death in that pot from 2 Kings. That's what we need, in the congregation, is that wisdom.
Yeah, I think so, and I'm also convinced that if I were to address every one of those things personally, then immediately it takes on another dimension that is not healthy for anybody.
Agreed.
And I'm caught, right? Because if I shut that person down myself, now I'm the bullet, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So I can't. There's some battles that a pastor has that she or he cannot fight by themselves, nor should they.
Right.
And congregations should, in fact, step into those places.
Right.
One of my friends says that one of my acquaintances says that he says he has a taint so committee, right?
A taint so that's good.
So that
that taint so.
That taint so. Yeah, right. Yeah. You know, but I think. What I'm worried about, George, honestly, is the kind of unnecessary detachment of pastoral identity from congregation.
Yes.
As if I really believe, if we follow the New Testament, that pastoring is one of the gifts, right? And so I really believe I'm living out my gift, no better gift than the other gifts, right?
In the
Other
congregation.
people have gifts, and that I want people to live into their gifts as passionately as I do into pastoring. But I don't understand us as against one another. This is a part of being the body.
This is an interesting thing about our Baptist tradition. So, whereas in other traditions there's a kind of caste system of clergy and laity, right? Well, in our case, we are technically, even though we are clergy, we are part of the laity.
Right.
Now we don't often talk about it, but our first identity is to be one priest among other priests, right? Now we are priests to the priest, so to speak. So, but we are only designated as such from within the body.
Right.
Right. So when we get into this professionalism of ministry thing that I think you're alluding to, now it's like we're on the free market of what congregation wants to call us to take our ministry to them.
Right.
Well, our ministry is only what it is in relationship to a people. It's not that we carry a ministry with us.
Right. And as I was getting at this in that 2 Kings text today, you know, this idea of understanding the gathering as a company of prophets.
That's right.
Right. This is not just the prophet and these people, but the company of the prophets. That everybody there, not just Elisha, everybody there is actually claimed by their prophetic identity.
Yes.
And I don't know, in this kind of caste system or chasm, that we give the permission or the voice to the prophetic identity of the people who traditionally sit in the pews. Right?
Yes.
And that
and sometimes come to say to us, Pastor, it's time.
Exactly.
Okay, it's time. We can't dither anymore.
Right.
This is something that we have to address. You know, I'll tell you that a few years ago, we had delayed the decision about what place LGBTQ Christians in our church would have. We had never made a formal decision about that, never had a study or talked about it or whatever. And because as a pastor, you know where your people are, and you try to read and sense when it's ready. You know what's going on inside your own heart and mind. And so for a couple of years, we had a man nominated to be a deacon who was a faithful, wonderful Christian, beloved in the church, but a partnered gay man. And I knew that the church was not yet prepared to have that conversation. I believed that to be true. And there were a number of reasons for that. And so I exercised some pastoral judgment to the new deacon committee in saying, I really would like you to not bring that to the church, even though he's so well nominated and endorsed by people, because we don't want to make him the issue. This is my job to get the church ready to deal with this question. And after a couple of years, 2 or 3 of doing that. I was ready, but the people had said to me, okay, Pastor, no more. So it's time for the church to do this. And so some people, of course, thought, okay, this is just George, rushing all of this. They didn't know that what was happening is these 5 kids that grew up in our church had come out, and this committee had told me, you can't hold this back anymore. We need to talk about this. And the Supreme Court had said, there's a change in the law of the land now, right? And we all knew on the ground that people were changing their mind about this. Okay, Pastor, it's time. It's time. So the people are prophets too.
Yeah, and I think we miss that. So I hear people say, well, my church isn't ready.
Yeah.
They're far more ready.
Often.
And ahead of us, right?
That's exactly right.
So what took you so long?
Right. Well, and sometimes I think what happens is that because we're sort of the, at least titular head, if not official head, of what feels like an institution, typically you think in terms of institutional preservation, right? About stability and unity and all those sorts of things, and understanding you've got a staff here that you need to pay and whatnot. The people themselves, we overestimate their commitment to no controversy, no trouble. The truth is, a lot of times the people are ready for an adventure too in faith.
That's right.
And both of us have had the privilege of being in churches that had a history of courageous work that was being done through them. And what an honor that we get to serve them.
Oh man, I cannot think of anything else I'd want to be doing, nor any other place that I would want to be doing it than with the people of Concord Church.
Well, and you do it well, and I've watched your relationship to those people, and I've experienced an amazing weekend of recognition of that relationship here. Your being present with me in this blessing is more than I can say. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, George.
All right. Thanks for being on Good God.
Good to be here.
All right.